Aristotle. You want to remember that Aristotle is Plato's most famous student. But he's also, more than that, he's one of the most influential thinkers in world history. He has a tremendous influence in shaping the intellectual life of the classical world, ancient Greece, the Hellenistic world. You're going to learn that word Hellenistic. But Aristotle's thought is going to spread across Alexander the Great's empire, across what we think of as the Roman Republic and the Roman Empire. His work is going to be very important in the Muslim world, in what today we call the Middle East. It's going to be important in shaping Christendom in Europe and North Africa, Christian Europe and North Africa. And he's going to have a tremendous influence in shaping Jewish thought, which we find Jewish thinkers both in Christendom and in the Muslim world. Even today, the basic vocabulary of science and philosophy, the big words of philosophy and science, for the most part, come to us from Aristotle, from Aristotle's work. And it's hard to overstate the importance and the influence that Aristotle has. Aristotle is an example of a personality type that you may run across every now and then. We could describe Aristotle as a polymath, or making reference to a later point in history, we can call him, looking backwards, call him a Renaissance man, a person of the Renaissance. Someone who's a polymath, or a Renaissance man, or a Renaissance woman, or a person of the Renaissance, or a person who has the spirit of the Renaissance, is someone who's interested in lots of different things. But not only interested in lots of different things, but has gained knowledge about different things, and someone who knows a lot about a lot of different things. That would be a good way of thinking about Aristotle. We only have a very small amount of material that comes to us from Aristotle, and his writings which have survived. Just a very small amount. But even in what has survived, he's answered the big questions of science and philosophy. I can't guarantee he answers all of them, but he answers by far most of them, and nearly all of them at least. Now, I'm not telling you that the answers Aristotle comes up with are the right answers. Sometimes he gives us woefully bad answers. But he has an answer for the big questions of science and philosophy. And even today, thinkers who come to ask those questions oftentimes start with Aristotle, and the question is, well, was Aristotle's answer right or wrong? And if it was wrong, where did Aristotle go wrong? And that's the starting point for coming up with one's own answer to the question. Aristotle is identified with the city of Athens. He makes Athens his home for by far most of his life. But because he's not born in Athens, he's never an Athenian citizen, and that is significant in shaping a lot of Aristotle's political thought and even his own personal life in really some interesting ways, as we'll see maybe a little bit today. Aristotle is born far away from the city of Athens, born in a city called Stagira, up to the north of the northern part of Greece. I'm going to zoom in on the map here so you can give you an idea of where Stagira is. It actually plays an important role in the Aristotle story in just a few minutes. Athens is down here. I'm trying to move the little pointer thing around where the city of Athens is. Aristotle is born in the northern part of Greece, up here in Stagira. That's where Stagira is. It's right next door to a kingdom called Macedonia. Now this becomes a very important part of the story later on. Macedonia was a kingdom to the north of Greece. The Macedonians never thought of themselves as Greeks. The Greeks certainly never thought of the Macedonians as being Greek. They considered the Macedonians barbarians, some people who were not Greek, foreigners. The Macedonians spoke a language which was related to the Greek language, and certainly living next door, well, we know this. Aristotle learned to speak the Macedonian language. That becomes a major part of the story, as you'll see. Well, Aristotle is born into the family. His father is the royal physician to the king of Stagira. His name is the father's name is Nicomachus. That name is going to be significant later. I always have trouble with Nicomachus because, I'll tell you why later. But he's orphaned as a young boy. His father died, and the mother both die when he's about the age of 6. He's adopted by his brother-in-law, the husband of his older sister, who raises him. And then when Aristotle is 17 years old, his adopted family sends him to Athens, where he stays for his first day in Athens. And they send him explicitly to study at the academy. Aristotle has already shown them that he's very bright, and so Athens by this point has gained a reputation for where you go if you want to study and to train your mind, and especially you want to study with Plato at Plato's academy. Aristotle will stay in Plato's academy for 20 years, first as a student and then as a teacher. As Plato recognizes that Aristotle has a brilliant mind, he begins to give Aristotle his own students to teach. And Aristotle is very heavily influenced by Plato. He has very many nice things to say about Plato. Eventually he's going to come to differ with Plato on very important issues, but he continually contains a respect for Plato, and he has some very nice things to say about Plato in his writings, although he does take some digs at Plato. He does have some hard feelings. Plato dies in 348. Aristotle by this point has been at the academy for 20 years. He's 37 years old. Either he had expected to inherit the academy from Plato, or he had expected to be made the master teacher at the academy. But Plato in his will leaves the academy to one of his nephews, and his nephew takes the position as the main teacher, the director, the dean, I guess we might say today, of the academy. And Aristotle has some bruised feelings about that. He leaves Athens. He goes over to Anatolia, an island just off the shore of Anatolia. By now you know where Anatolia is, where modern Turkey is today, where he spends a few years. But then something happens in Greek history that you're going to be learning more about, and that is that Philip of Macedon conquers the Greeks, and Aristotle's life enters a time period that I'm going to just call the Macedonian captivity. Philip of Macedon conquers Greece. He conquers the part of Anatolia where Aristotle is living. Philip has a young son named Alexander. He's going to grow up and become Alexander the Great. At this point, he's just Alexander the little kid. But because Aristotle has a reputation for being the greatest teacher in the Greek tradition, Philip takes Alexander captive and takes him back to Macedon, where Aristotle is held essentially as a slave to be the tutor, the teacher of Philip's son, Alexander. You're going to be learning more about both of these characters later. But Aristotle enters into their story, and we'll come back to this part of Aristotle's life later when we talk about Alexander the Great and talk a little bit about Alexander's education under Aristotle. Of course, in conquering the Greeks, Philip had conquered the city of Stagira, the city of Aristotle's birth. Philip had had a beef with Stagira for a while, I guess being so close to each other they'd had some kind of conflict. Philip had taken the citizens of Stagira and made them slaves to the Macedonians. In reward for Aristotle's tutelage of Alexander, Philip restored freedom, citizenship to the citizens of Stagira, returned them back home. And that's part of the story, which is kind of interesting. Well, eventually Alexander becomes emperor of the Macedonian Empire and starts his own story, and we'll pick up that part of the story later. He no longer needs his teacher, so Aristotle returns to Athens, where he will live for most of the rest of his life. He will start two schools, really one school, but in two different stages. The first one called the Peripatetic School. Peripatetic is comes from two Greek words. It means walking around. That's because as an Athenian citizen, as a non-Athenian citizen, he's not an Athenian citizen. Aristotle couldn't purchase any property within the city of Athens. And so he just would walk around the city with his students, walking through the streets, teaching them. Today we use that word peripatetic to refer to a teacher who moves around a lot, whether that means moving from one school to another or moving around a lot inside a classroom. Some of you have seen me lecture inside a classroom, and in that sense I'm a peripatetic teacher because I walk around while I speak. That's one reason why I don't do very well with a camera that doesn't move following me around, because I'm used to walking around while I'm talking. But that's neither here nor there. Eventually, he will be able to purchase a piece of property outside the city limits, where he will build a school called the Lyceum. That word lyceum, just like the word academy, is a word that we've picked up in Western culture and used to apply to academic stuff, to school stuff. The lycée is a French word for school, and in English we use the word lyceum to refer to a large lecture hall in a college or university setting, a place where many students gather at once to hear a speaker give a special presentation or a special lecture. We call that a lyceum. Aristotle teaches at his own school now, the Lyceum, for about 12 years or so. The death of Alexander the Great, and we'll talk much more about Alexander the Great later, will spark a problem for Aristotle, because the Athenians will revolt against the Macedonian Empire, restore a democratic form of government in Athens, and Aristotle is seen as a traitor for having been connected with Alexander. He is tried for treason, sentenced to death, but unlike Socrates, Aristotle takes the chance to leave. He leaves Athens, goes to another town in Greece. He explains to his students that he's leaving because he won't give the Athenians a chance to kill two philosophers. Make of that what you will. He'll die in middle age, in his late 60s, having left behind an incredible body of work and an intellectual tradition.